Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Erik Voss, and Marvel's Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania is now streaming on Disney+, allowing us to see even more details in this complicated movie. Details that you might have missed the first time around, extra context coming from the people who made it, some possible answers for why. So let's break down all the new stuff that we found in Quantumania. In the Marvel Studios fanfare, we see He Remains from the Loki finale at the top of the A, marking the first time a villain has been included in the Marvel Studios opening title card. And yes, Marvel is still in a bit of an awkward spot given Jonathan Majors' legal troubles. The jury is still literally out as of this taping, so we won't be wading into that here. But the prologue scene shows Kang the Conqueror's arrival in the quantum realm after he was banished by the Kang dynasty for starting the multiversal war. Notice the sky is streaked with these streaks of brilliant purple and teal, Kang's signature colors. But three pieces break off of Kang's ship as it arrives, perhaps representing the three Kangs who sabotaged the ship and led to his betrayal: Pharaoh Rama-Tut, Immortus, and Scarlet Centurion. And yes, there may be a connection between those three timekeepers and the fourth broken statue from Loki. That statue could represent this exiled Kang. Now, the screenwriter said this imagery was meant to evoke the fall of the angel Lucifer from heaven into hell, inspired by John Milton's Paradise Lost. We could also see Kang as a Napoleonic figure, exiled to his Elba here, but only a temporary exile before Napoleon's grand comeback at the Battle of Waterloo. That Waterloo on the horizon could be Avengers Secret Wars. Janet Van Dyne had been stuck in the quantum realm since she shrank between atoms to disable a rogue ICBM in 1987. You could see Kang's arrival as the first indication that Janet was lying to Hank and Hope when she indicated that she'd been down there alone all that time. Alternatively, Kang's arrival here could be taking place in a timeline that's been warped by the events of Loki, which would be in a timeline skewed from that Nexus moment in Avengers Endgame when Loki escaped with the Tesseract, and only now has the MCU been retconned with Kang's influence. I like the detail of Janet herding these horse-like creatures with snail heads. While this movie never really explains much about the quantum realm's fauna or evolutionary history, I just like the gag of one of the slowest animals being mixed with one of the fastest. Now, the creature that attacks Janet starts as one entity but then splits into two. This is imagery that repeats throughout the quantum realm. Kang saves Janet by blasting the creature right before it pounces on her, and she saves him by showing him the quantum realm ropes. Scott Lang's opening montage is set to John Sebastian's theme song for the sitcom Welcome Back, Kotter, which is a callback to the 2018 Ant-Man and the Wasp openings montage, which was set to Come On Get Happy, which is the theme song for the sitcom The Partridge Family. They're both very upbeat and optimistic, and up until this point, Scott has been one of the more lighthearted characters in the MCU, often played as comic relief among the other more serious Avengers. But this film causes him to confront his own place in things, what responsibility he has to the greater good and the world at large, and really step up into the role of an Avenger and what that really means. As screenwriter has said, with Paul Rudd, we had the opportunity to do this throwback 90s dad protagonist the way Robin Williams in Hook or Jumanji feels. You have this playful superhero that most people think is pretty low stakes, and the pitch we had was, what if he's accidentally in an Avengers movie basically by himself, completely out of its depth? Now, it gets blocked by a shrub here, but on the wall is graffiti of Ant-Man with a heart around it, showing how he's become a bit of a celebrity, like all the loving wall art of Tony Stark that we saw in Spider-Man Far From Home. But I also just like the detail that people of this world might not know if he's alive or dead, because they don't know which of the Avengers died in the Battle of Earth. But Scott is recognized everywhere he goes now in this neighborhood, which does follow his role in reversing the blip with the rest of the Avengers. It was his escape from the quantum realm and that 5 years time dilation discovery of time travel's possibility that really unlocked everything, though really we should give credit to that rat. This is just a funny development after that scene in Endgame where some kids wanted a photo with Hulk but couldn't care less about Scott. Now we know that Ms. Marvel established Scott guested on that This Powered Life podcast, and now he's branched out with an autobiography titled Look Out for the Little Guy. Actually, remember, his book tour was teased in Black Panther Wakanda Forever, and you can actually buy this book on Amazon. The first fan we really get a good look at in this montage is played by Patricia Belcher from movies like Jeepers Creepers and Species. She only appears here briefly, which makes me think they probably filmed more with her but might have had to cut it for time. There was a lot reworked from this opening section, all the stuff that they shot in this location. It's got high fives a kid with an Ant-Man backpack, the photo on it taken directly from 2015 Ant-Man promo material. I'm going to assume that this kid is a young Kang, just because I'm crazy. Then Scott visits Bridge Donuts, with donuts overpriced at $3.50 per, and all themed around San Francisco. We see the Embarcadero, the Summer of Love, the Hate, Presidio, Pier 39, Golden Gate, and the Candlestick. The cafe owner named Ruben is played by actor Ruben Rabasa, who played the balloon vendor, Mr. Cardozo in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and a hilarious character in Tim Robinson's I Think You Should Leave.
Any other ideas?
Stinky!
What?
Here he says,
Ruben, you are the best.
Thank you, Spider-Man!
He's clearly confusing Scott with the other bug-branded superhero. Scott's opening narrations referencing his time traveling with Captain America in Avengers Endgame, how that didn't make sense. Though, in Loki, we learned that that was something the Kang variant He Who Remains wanted them to do.
What they did was supposed to happen. You escaping was not.
FBI agent Jimmy Woo returns. He and Scott finally get that lunch date that they planned at the end of the 2018 movie.
I thought you were inviting me somewhere.
Like a party or like dinner or something?
I don't know. I thought you were planned the evening.
No, I meant to like arrest you. I'll arrest you later again.
Take it easy, Jimmy.
Okay. Did you want to grab dinner or something? I mean, because I'm free. Yeah, come on.
We see Scott doing some sleight of hand to conjure the credit card. We saw in WandaVision how Jimmy Woo picked up Scott's close-up magic hobby, but the bill gets paid by a different couple. A cameo here by YouTuber Ryan Bergara and his wife, Marielle Scott. I actually got to cameo in one of his Watcher videos, Top 5 Beatdown. Go check it out. Watcher's an amazing YouTube channel. Also among the early cameos is Mark Everett of the band Eels, who asked Scott to take a photo with his dog. Mark is the son of physicist Hugh Everett III, who was the guy who originally proposed the many-worlds theory of quantum physics, which this movie and most of Marvel Phases 5 and 6 would not exist without. Scott's old Baskin-Robbins boss Dale returns in the 2015 film, shaking Scott's hand for way too long as he now awards him Employee of the Century using an old company photo, and he kept Scott's pink apron and name tag Jack, which Paul Rudd actually picked as a shout out to his son, Jack. This goofy award is also kind of a running gag with Cassie giving him World's Greatest Grandma trophy in the previous film. Quantumania is the 31st movie in the MCU, which is a nice bit of coincidence with the 31 Baskin-Robbins flavors. We see that Hope now runs the Pim Van Dyne Foundation, and she uses Pim particles for various humanitarian efforts, including food production, reversing deforestation, expanding public housing. Scott's VO narration transitions to him reading aloud from his book at City Lights bookstore. That's not the actual City Lights bookstore in the Bay Area, but that's what they call it here in the set. For this crowd of fans, including some kids dressed like Ant-Man, and this one that he exchanges a wink with, the fact that this opening narration is justified to be Scott reading from his book makes us wonder at the end of the movie, who is Scott talking to then? And also on the back of Scott's Look Out for the Little Guy book are promotional quotes from Christine Everhart and Bruce Banner. Everhart was the WHIH journalist from the first Iron Man film who interrogated Scott in promo shorts for the 2015 Ant-Man film. Scott picks up Cassie from jail, which is where Scott began the 2015 film. Just like Hank kept a shrunken Soviet tank on his keychain, Cassie shrank this cop car, its alarm going off adorably. Cassie's really taking inspiration from both generations of Ant-Man, Hank, Pym, and Scott. On the drive home, Cassie says she got arrested while protesting the city clearing a homeless encampment of people who had lost their homes in the blip, referring to the people who got dusted back just to find their homes already occupied, creating this housing crisis. Spider-Man Far From Home and the Flag Smashers plotline and the Falcon and Winter Soldier introduced the concept of the blip reversal, wreaking havoc in terms of causing limited sources like housing and food, and this shows that it's an ongoing issue. Cassie also says,
Dad, a guy dressed like a bee tried to kill me in my room when I was 6. I've never had a normal life.
Yes, setting up Darren's return in this movie as MODOK. Scott also finds out that Cassie has her own suit, which he is not pleased about. Scott plays a clip from his audiobook during this drive.
How did the Hulk turn me into a baby? Will I be a baby forever? A little after that, a raccoon from space showed up. I don't think he knew my name. I was just happy to meet a raccoon who could talk.
Yes, more nods to Avengers Endgame, Scott meeting Rocket, and when their time travel experiments resulted in Scott coming back as a baby. This reminds us of how they accidentally invented a kind of immortality when you think about it, or at least slow aging, which becomes important when their super intelligent ants age 1,000 years in a day in this movie. Thank you to BetterHelp for sponsoring this video. Movies and TVs can be great escapism, but when it's time to face things head on, BetterHelp is here to help. BetterHelp is the world's largest therapy service, and it's 100% online. With BetterHelp, you can tap into a network of over 30,000 licensed and experienced therapists who can help you with a wide range of issues. To get started, just answer a few questions about what you're looking for from therapy and what your preferences are. BetterHelp will then match you with a therapist from their network that's right for you. After that, talk to your therapist however you feel comfortable, whether it's via text, chat, phone, or video call. You can message your therapist at any time and schedule live sessions when it's convenient for you. If your therapist isn't the right fit for any reason, you can switch to a new therapist at no additional charge. BetterHelp gives you the same level of professionalism and quality you expect from in-office therapy, but with a therapist who is custom picked for you, with scheduling flexibility and at a more affordable price. Get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/newrockstars. That's BetterHelp.com/newrockstars for 10% off your first month of therapy. Now, the Pym house is now located on this street in San Francisco that's actually not too far from where I live. At the end of Ant-Man and the Wasp, remember, Hank had shrunken it down and moved it by a beach, but it's back now. Hank saves $8 by using old school Pym particles to enlarge a pizza, which director Peyton Reed confirmed is a nod to that pizza hydration scene in Back to the Future 2, as he directed the making of documentaries for the Back to the Future sequels and was on set when they shot that pizza scene.
Oh boy, Mom, you sure can hydrate a pizza.
In Hank's ear, we see that he has his hearing aid, setting up his frequency and tangling with the ants later on. Now, over dinner, Cassie reminds Scott of previous good deeds that he's done and moral stances he's taken, like when he hacked into VistaCorp. Remember, that was a company that Scott used to work for that was screwing over its customers. This is what landed Scott in prison. She brings up Scott going to Germany to fight Captain America in Civil War, and Scott corrects her that he fought with Captain Cap, as in alongside Cap, because he was on Team Cap. When discussing Cassie's recent stint in jail, Hank says he would have just broken her out with the ants, referencing the scene in Ant-Man when he used ants to smuggle the suit into Scott's cell. Then, as we enter their basement lab, right away there are a ton of visual clues pointing to Cassie and Hank having geeked out over ants and technology together. Cassie's quantum satellite device has a silver and bronze color like a vintage stereo, reflecting Hank's old school design influence. Scott sees their huge ant farm, and all the ants have these helmets with these green lights. The display screen on the other side of the room has the 3D image of an ant on it. On the desk are textbooks about ants, Dr. Eleanor's Common Ants of California, and Journey to the Ants by Bert Holdobler and Edward O. Wilson. Janet, though, is suddenly super worried.
You know how dangerous the quantum realm is. We all do, Mom. Nobody's going to the quantum realm.
And she's right to be concerned, since MODOK, we learn later, activates Cassie's device. They all get sucked in. While most of them get sucked in against their will, I like the detail that Hope chooses to let go, a heroic move as she goes after her parents and the rest of her family to save them. Now, as he tumbles down the rabbit hole of the quantum realm, Scott bumps into the ant farm, proving the ants got sucked in too, and that glass breaks right there, and this is the moment the ants go flying everywhere, setting them on their trajectory in this movie, and reminding us of that amazing Simpsons episode, Deep Space Homer. The family gets separated and Scott slaps the chest piece onto his suit. Compared to the last time we saw him in Endgame, his suit in the opening sequence now has a different chest piece, and that's because this is a form of portable nanotech that contains the entire suit, similar to Tony Stark tech. After Giant Scott catches Cassie, I love how she proves she already knows how to work this in her own suit by pressing the button on Scott's glove to shrink him back down. He doesn't ask for orange slices this time though, so I guess he's gotten more used to sizing up and down. Hope and Hank realize where they are and they shout panic-stricken for Janet. They're no doubt thinking about how they only now just got Janet back after the last time she was lost in the quantum realm. What Cassie thought was the sun behind Scott has a stuttered movement as they realize it's actually a predator. I just love the way this is revealed. It looks like the sun is moving, like Glinda the Good Witch's bubble in The Wizard of Oz. Scott, though, enlarges, he takes out the paramecium thing, and they end up getting saved by the freedom fighters. Meanwhile, Janet explains to Hank,
"You weren't able to look deep enough. Not through the void and subatomica."
She's referring to the moment Hank and Janet left the quantum realm in the 2018 film when Peyton Reed hid a city in the background. That area with the chaotic visuals must be what Janet was referring to by the void, and in the comics, subatomica is the name of a solar system contained within the microverse. Scott and Cassie are taken to the freedom fighter camp where they have to drink the ooze from this character Veb, who's voiced by David Dastmalchian, who played Kurt in the previous films. I love what you think is this threatening chant is actually an encouragement by this camp, basically saying, join us, join us, join us, because they want to be able to communicate with these newcomers. This ooze acts as a translator so they can understand everyone in the quantum realm. It's almost like the TARDIS translation matrix from Doctor Who. William Jackson Harper, Chidi from The Good Place, plays the telepath Quaz.
His name is Scott Lang. He has 7 holes.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so 1 mouth, 2 nostrils, 2 eyes, 2 ears, and an anus and urethra. That is 9 holes. I don't know what's going on here. Maybe Scott isn't counting his eyes because there are eyeballs plugged in them, or maybe his nostrils aren't being counted because the nasal cavity leads to the same esophagus and trachea hole as the mouth, or maybe Scott just doesn't want the society to know he's got lower parts because he doesn't want to get probed, so he's just saying 7, 7, 7, 7, 7, and hope that they don't look for other holes on him, or maybe he's just bad at math. Because you know in Paul Rudd's eyes, he's doing that thing from Clue, like the 1 + 2 + 1 + 1. The Mandalorian's Katie O'Brien plays the freedom fighter leader Jentora. Now in the comics, Jentora is from the planet Ka'ai, and she's the niece of Queen Jarella, a love interest for the Hulk. There are a lot of interesting looking creatures around this camp, including, I'm most fascinated now upon the rewatch, these guys with heads that are glowing colors of the Infinity Stones. Why is this important? Well, after Endgame, directors Joe and Anthony Russo confirmed in an interview that Thanos only reduced the stones to the atomic level. The stones are still present in the universe. So somewhere in the quantum realm, maybe atomized stone particles, and it is possible that the atomized stones could have flown in the quantum realm and birthed these things. Janet takes Hank and Hope to this dune region where they encounter this group of nomads. 2 of them arrive on these flying ship-like things that start as 1 splits into 2, just like the creatures in the beginning. Then Janet earns respect by winning a fight, and she gets this trilobite that she telepathically communicates to find out that it is friendly. Now, on their flight to Axia, they pass this landing pad that has an image of Kang's face, showing that the Conqueror has fascistically begun to stamp his visage on everything. Janet leads Hank and Hope to the city of Axia, where we learn
this changes everything we know about life, evolution, our place in the galaxy. Holy shit. That guy looks like broccoli.
Yes, Broccoli Man is voiced by Graham Fox, who was the on-set reader for the character Crow in Eternals. They enter a bar that has a distinct Star Wars cantina vibe, and Hope gets hit on by the aforementioned Broccoli Man because even the Quantum Realm lady just can't get a drink in peace. They meet Janet's old flame, Krylar. In the comics, Krylar is a one-and-done character from the planet Kai in the Microverse, who goes by the alias Steward of All Assassins and shows up in the Incredible Hulk 156. Similarly, Krylar in this movie doesn't last too long before Hank Pym enlarges that squid creature delicacy that grabs him, but for whatever reason does not eat him. On the flight away, Hank says,
I had dinner with someone a few times. Her name was Linda. It didn't work out.
So Linda was going to be a hot scientist character played by Jennifer Coolidge, but the character was cut according to Jeff Loveness. Kang, meanwhile, sends MODOK to hunt Scott and Cassie from the Freedom Fighter camp. In the comics, MODOK is AIM technician George Tarleton, who gets mutated by the Cosmic Cube. Marvel Studios retconned MODOK to be Darren Cross. Corey Stoll's villain, Yellow Jacket from the 2015 film. His body parts disproportionately shrunk after being zipped down to the quantum realm, and yeah, a bit of an uncanny valley. Though I'm fairly certain upon watching it on Disney Plus now, the VFX artist did do a bit of retexturing upgrade to Corey Stoll's face. A montage flashes back to Darren and his defeat in the 2015 film, and then it picks back up with his disfigured form in the quantum realm and Kang restoring his body to his pale, creepy little butt. And he becomes a source of mockery for the rest of the film. Now, Peyton Reed talked in an interview about the shot of MODOK being reconstructed that, quote, that visual effects shot where we show it was something that struck us as very funny, his quick version, and short of grotesque. One of my notes in that shot was like, oh, that's really great, but you need to see a little bit more of his butt crack in this. Also notice MODOK has this heart rate monitor on his chest that later flatlines when he dies. He also has that crystal on his forehead to fire a beam at Scott and detain them for Kang. Janet finally tells Hope and Hank her history with Kang the Conqueror, and we see in the flashback that Janet tells Kang about the last time she saw Hope, a scene that we saw in the 2018 film prologue, and Kang says,
Time, it's not what you think it is. It's a cage, and it does everything it can to break you. It's not until you free yourself from it that you see just how small it always was.
She says Kang's ship could travel the multiverse, and Hank asks,
Multiverse? As in alternate dimensions, parallel realities?
I didn't believe it at first, but it's real. Just like we theorized.
Janet recounts how after saving each other, she and Kang agreed to help each other rebuild and reactivate the multiversal engine core of this ship. We don't know how many of the other Kangs have this kind of technology, but we have to assume none of them do, or they all do, now that He Who Remains is out of the picture, but they have this kind of truce where they check each other's infinite power over the time stream, kind of mutually assured destruction. But this Kang the Conqueror, went rogue. He refused to play by any of their rules. He was disciplined for it. Janet says his ship is neurokinetic, connected to his thoughts, and this sequence uses the sacred timeline imagery from Loki, but it shows this Kang the Conqueror tearing it apart. It's amazing to go through this frame by frame because Janet sees a field of exploding planets. One planet that has a blue glowing wound with a smoldering red core at the center of it. Janet says, I felt what he had done, and we get a quick shot of Kang with his eyes glowing and the lines on his face glowing right where his scars are as he blasts a beam from his fist at these fleeing victims in the smoky burnt forest. These victims are some civilization of people wearing green clothes, including, horribly, a mother hugging her child just before destruction hits. And blue fire throws some guys off their feet as fire burns through one man's face before he turns to ash. And remember, when we saw Kang crash into the quantum realm, in the earlier parts of this flashback with Janet, he is wearing the same kind of green clothes that these people are wearing. These were his neighbors or his home people, which is even more messed up. He probably knew them and they trusted him. So either he started his destructive conquest with his home civilization, or he would migrate from civilization to civilization, timeline to timeline, assimilating in with that group of people, kind of like those birds that lay their eggs in other birds' nests, and then one day, snap, he just starts massacring them all. Janet describes what she saw.
Entire worlds, entire timelines, gone. Like they never even existed.
And now the planets that we saw before completely explode as the giant blue beams surge into their surfaces, and we zoom out to see these planets are contained within a single strand of a sacred timeline, a strand that now bursts, leaving several burnt ends, and the last thing we see is a huge bundle of strands all exploding in a flash of white. We cut back to Janet, who still holds onto the ship, and horror shows on her face as more of the Kang's memories unfold, unseen by the audience. Kang sees in her eyes that she knows who he is, and immediately flips into manipulation mode. When it's clear he's not going to convince Janet just to leave with him, he frames his master plan in a single word.
Win.
So Janet disables his core by enlarging it beyond use with PIM discs. It's interesting that Janet hung on to these, maybe for a rainy day, or maybe deep down she did not 100% trust Kang and she knew that she would need to keep them just in case. And she makes the heroic sacrifice of trapping them both down there indefinitely. Now meanwhile, Kang introduces himself to Scott, who confidently tells him that he's an Avenger. Kang says that he's killed Avengers before, and for the second time in this movie, Scott is confused with someone else.
You're not the one with the hammer.
That's Thor. We get confused a lot. Similar body types.
Kang has specifically killed Thor, which I speculated might have been right before Thor sparked Vision to life, since Vision and his multiverse mind would pose potentially the greatest threat to Kang in another timeline. When Kang mentions Janet, he actually looks hurt when he realizes she didn't tell anyone about him. He's probably been obsessing about it for years, just like he couldn't get all the people he murdered out of his head. Again, his neighbors! He killed everyone at the cookout! And Kang explains that he knows how all of time ends.
Me. A lot of me. They exiled me down here. They're afraid of me.
It's pretty similar to what his variant He Who Remains says in Loki.
And if you think I'm evil, well, just wait till you meet my variants.
Now to compare these two, while He Who Remains was extremely animated, jumping in and out of his desk chair, Major's performance as Kang is more rigid, regal, and what the actor describes as no moves wasted. He drew upon historical figures like Julius Caesar, Genghis Khan, Alexander the Great. So then Kang threatens Cassie, which gets Scott to help him shrink the core, and Kang opens a portal to the site. Scott dives into the probability storm and begins splitting into variants, which MODOK describes as Schrodinger's box, Scott being the cat in that metaphor, referring to Erwin Schrodinger's thought experiment using an unobserved system. Schrodinger's cat was first referenced in the MCU back on Eric Selvig's chalkboard in Thor the Dark World. This was also described by Bill Foster in the 2018 Ant-Man the Wasp.
In other words, the object in question would be both in and out of phase with multiple parallel realities.
Now, the bands of the score have some writing on them. It's language based on circles, which actually you can see recurring in other parts of the quantum realm. It's interesting how all this is connected to Kang, which makes sense historically as an invader. One of the signs of imperialism is the invading force establishes a new language, a new written language that the colonized people then have to adopt. One of Scott's variants is himself if he never became an Avenger and stayed at Baskin-Robbins, or if he was just an Avenger who also just continued to work at Baskin-Robbins. Actually, off screen, you can hear another Scott asking, "Do you have ice cream?" Now, when one of the Scotts sizes up, he unravels into ribbons, which looks a lot like what Wanda Maximoff does to Reed Richards in Multiverse of Madness. So you gotta imagine it's very painful. I imagine this is just what it looks like when you just get unraveled out of existence. Like all of us are bundles of sacred timeline ribbons all tied together in a knot, what Miguel O'Hara calls the nodes of the web of the Spider-Verse. So in order to prune someone out of existence, you're basically unraveling that knot. Now this scene shows that the Scott variants put their helmets up out of fear, while our Scott stays unhelmeted. This shows them as more courageous and determined than the others, but it also shows the viewer to follow him in this scene without getting confused. Also worth mentioning that the very first double that steps away from Scott when he first splits turns and faces the other direction, which tells us that that doppelganger, what defined him was his choice to turn away from the drama and run away in fear. But the thought of saving Cassie is the one constant that draws all of these alternatives back together. It's one thing they have in common. And so all of them need to get drawn back together, even the ones who turned away in fear, because you also need to bring your fear with you. Meanwhile, Hope performs her own heroic dive to save Scott, and based on Instagram photos, there was a deleted scene from this section that would have shown Hope facing her own identity crisis in this probability storm, facing variants of herself as a mother with children in her arms. But yes, this scene was removed. So after shrinking the core back down, Kang tells Hope,
"Hello, Jelly Bean,"
which was Janet's nickname for her. Just a creepy way of indicating that he knows Hope and reminding us of how much he and Janet shared in their time together. So Kang takes the core and Janet back to his fortress, where he projects the sacred timeline around the room, starting with a ring in his hand.
Universes colliding, endless incursions. I saw the multiverse, and it was dying, all because of them.
He Who Remains also felt that what he was doing was for the greater good, at the expense of all the other Kangs. So it's kind of a running theme that each one thinks his plan is the correct one. This inability to work together puts the Kangs in direct contrast to the united front Scott just put up with his variants. Kang projects one ring over the other, with branches veering downward and colliding with these flashes. These represent incursions. When He Who Remains first revealed the multiverse in his origin story, he depicted it by one ring floating atop another. Now we see how the sacred timeline timeline's eruption upon Sylvie killing He Who Remains affects another sacred timeline. That event, as well as Peter Parker and Dr. Strange's spell going awry, and Strange and Wanda Maximoff dreamwalking and Multiverse of Madness, these are all examples of incursions. And it's interesting, upon watching Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, they use the same white glowing tree branch imagery. Kang blames the other Kangs in the Dynasty for their childish meddling and says,
"You have no idea what I have lost, and I will burn them out of time."
So when we see Kang vaporize people, in his mind, he is burning them out of time, like cauterizing a wound, leaving a scar like the ones on his face. We're left with the question of what Kang lost, really. You could say he's doing all this for his long-lost love of Ravonna Renslayer. We might get the answer in Loki Season 2, but again, with all the Jonathan Majors drama, who knows what they're really doing with that show. Hank, meanwhile, is saved by his ant farm. The ants time-dilated 1,000 years in a single day, meaning they slipped into a time vortex and built the socialistic technocratic society. The best parts of Ant-Man films are the ants. I will always say that over and over again. And these ants, in a way, neutralize Kang's advantage of technology hundreds of years in the future, because Kang's chosen system of governance is an archaic military dictatorship, though he does get away from them later. We'll talk about that in a bit. Really, I just love the futuristic design of the ants' architecture that you can see now that is streaming in high definition. They essentially built a vast ant colony, towers like the ones Hank kept them in, and these towers start from the top and work their way down, as ants instinctively start from the ground level and burrow deeper and deeper into the earth. Kang mobilizes his fortress to depart as the quantum realm with his entire army, declaring,
"Today, we conquer eternity and the dynasty of kings."
And Cassie cuts him off. Conquer eternity, just interesting choice of words. Eternity is part of the cosmic entity hierarchy, but I don't know if he was referring to that entity of eternity. But more importantly, Kang mentions the dynasty, whom we meet in the first post-credit scene, and will be the Kangs the Avengers have to face in Avengers: The Kang Dynasty in 2025. We'll see if Jonathan Majors is the one playing all of these Kangs in the future. Giant Scott arrives, assaulting Kang's fortress, stomping on his forces, mirroring how Kang will later stomp on his head like trying to crush an ant. We see how Scott picks up a disc-shaped piece of a building and uses it as a shield he later wedges into Kang's rings like Captain America Steve Rogers would, bringing Scott full circle with his reference membership on Team Cap from Civil War. And he cannonballs into these rings and he breaks them. Now, we have to admit that Scott's aggression in the scene is just a bit odd.
Kang! We had a deal! You took my daughter! You lied to me! Our word is our bond! Without that, we're nothing!
According to an unnamed VFX artist who opened up about their process working on this film, a lot of Scott's action in this final battle was fully animated from scratch. They said there were times when we were creating an actor's entire action, Ant-Man moving across something, and you just think, why didn't they film it the right way? Or how they wanted it in the first place? Why are we having to redo and recreate? Why do we have to Frankenstein together an actor's performance? So yeah, as we watch Giant Scott crush through everything, that might have just all been created by a VFX artist with Paul Rudd's voice from just some other voice session, and they just stitched it together all in post-production. Another artist blamed the fact that resources were diverted to Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, which was in post-production at the same time as Quantumania. According to that artist, quote, "In terms of priority, Wakanda Forever was definitely at the top of the list. All the money went to that. All the best resources went to that." So I think Marvel Studios has learned a lot of lessons from putting too much on their plates. And in February 2023, returning Disney CEO Bob Iger and Marvel Studios head Kevin Feige both implied a scale back in output. Now, Kang could have used that multiverse core to power his ship chair alone and escape the quantum realm without going to all this trouble, but he fails. Why? Because he got too greedy. He wanted to bring his entire fortress and his entire fleet with him to wage war on all the Kangs. Because he insisted on bringing all of his stuff with him, he gave Scott and the others enough time to stop him. His selfishness here directly contrasts with Janet's selflessness earlier in willingly trapping herself in the quantum realm. Giant Scott celebrates with Giant Cassie, father and daughter, finally on the same level, restoring their bond, and Cassie's faith that her dad will do the right thing. Cassie says she's hungry, craves a lime, to which Scott says,
"Citrus, it's weird, I know."
Calling back the running joke of Scott wanting orange slices whenever he goes big.
Does anyone have any orange slices?
And he even had orange slices in his hand when Clint came back with a baseball glove in Avengers Endgame. And so Kang, finally letting his rage boil over, floats down to the battle on this disc and vaporizes everyone in sight. Veb gets the holes he so desperately wanted, which he uses to Kirby some quantum knots, but Kang kills Zalem and Jentor is forced to retreat, and we briefly see one sentient building holding the other as it dies in its arms. Just oddly heartbreaking to watch. Cassie finally masters delivers the jump tap as she, Scott, and Hope fight Kang. Hank's ants save the day though, swarming him, and Darren takes Cassie's advice to stop being a dick, and he redeems himself. Just this shot of Corey Stoll's face bursting into the shield looks so good and vivid, as does Kang's look of shock and disgust back at MODOK, probably ruminating on the fact that he is always getting betrayed. Like, dude, maybe your managerial style is the reason people keep quitting on your team. Now, the ants pick apart Kang's armor and carry him away, and it's never exactly shown how Kang escaped these ants so that he could later confront Scott in the throne room, but a dictator with super advanced technology? I don't know, maybe he flipped one of these technocratic society ants into turning on the others. They watch MODOK die, and his heart rate monitor turns red and it flatlines.
And at least I died an Avenger.
Again, this whole journey for Scott, you could say, was to put him through a ringer to truly earn his status as an Avenger. And notice in this moment, MODOK's crown is broken and his face is bruised and bleeding. The VFX and character design just looks a lot better. And I just think it's because with that crown broken, there's no frame boxing in his face, giving it a more flat appearance. There's more dimension and texture to his face. Janet uses the quantum core to open a portal home, but Scott notices Kang approaching, pushes Cassie in so that he can stay behind and fight Kang to keep him out. Kang and Scott fight one-on-one, and I do love it when an epic third act battle just boils down to a simple fist fight or sword duel. Scott is outmatched, but he hangs in there.
I don't have to win. We both just have to lose.
Hope returns and helps Scott destroy the core with red and blue pin particles, pushing Kang into the vortex that creates and shrinking him out of sight. Presumably not dead, he's probably stuck in an endless probability storm where, unlike Scott, it's just gonna be really hard for Kang to cooperate with his variants. Yet one day our man is gonna figure it out, and I believe that is going to be the ultimate Kang who lords over Battle World and Secret Wars. Cassie uses her quantum realm telescope to locate the last known spot of the portal, and I guess is able to reopen it. All this happens real fast and is just a bit too easy, but there might be a reason why. Because this film's epilogue doesn't really leave things all neatly tied up with Scott. Like, he remains haunted by the consequences of defeating Kang the Conqueror, fearing the Kang dynasty beyond him. Now, I theorize that these final minutes of the film are part of a simulation or a warped timeline, a kind of nightmare scripted by the Kang dynasty. Because Scott loops back into the routine that he started the film in, but now there are all kinds of noticeable changes. Like, Ruben now knows who he is exactly, pedestrians are all acting super odd, giving him odd eye contact. There's like weird little glitches in the Matrix where he looks at a specific pair of extras that suddenly appear in front of him. His eyes seem to linger on people wearing specific shades of purple and green. Like, there are purple balloons at Cassie's party, there's a green cake. These are the colors of Kang's clothes and his armor. It kind of feels like Scott is in a sort of Truman Show scenario or frozen in a sitcom that he can't escape, which would explain why these movies keep opening with old sitcom theme songs playing. He's a comedian sitcom star being welcomed back, welcome back, welcome back, welcome back to this narrative loop written for him by architects controlling every aspect of his life. Architects thrilled that he did away with their pesky exile. And we know from set photos taken in January 2023 that this sidewalk shot with Paul Rudd carrying the pink cake box was part of reshoots taped only a month before the film's release, while the studio was in the midst of this big scale back plan that might have resulted in this movie's rushed ending that would omit any Young Avengers setup for Cassie Lang. So then we get the first of two post-credit scenes where exactly what Kang threatened and what Scott feared comes to pass, an arena filled with Kang variants teleporting in from squares of white light, all shouting and talking animatedly. This scene is taken directly from some famous comics imagery, 1988's Avengers 292, written by Walt Simonson, penciled by John Buscema, which is really a Namor story, but it features a cutaway in which Kang is summoned before the Council of Kangs, and we see three VIP Kangs, Pharaoh Ramatut, Immortus, and a futuristic suited Kang confirmed by the director and screenwriter to be a version of Scarlet Centurion. Ramatut, you'll notice, has a robotic body, telling us that this one might have survived some nasty battle with other Marvel heroes to require such cybernetic enhancement. And Immortus says,
"They're beginning to touch the multiverse, and if we let them, they will take everything we built. So let's stop wasting time."
And he opens the window to show the flowing sacred timeline outside, with split branches snaking in every direction, forming what we assume are incursions. Immortus turns away from the window, saying,
"We're late."
How many did you call?
All of us.
And we're back in the arena pit, where more and more Kangs teleport in. Most are wearing some combination of green and purple robes, but one wears dark gray armor, one wears a slim corporate suit, who I'm pretty sure is Mr. Griffin, CEO of Kang Enterprises, whose alternate reality version of Avengers Tower was pruned to the void in Loki episode 5. There are a lot more, they're all getting pumped up, and what we're seeing here is the Kang dynasty and thousands of Kangs that the Avengers will face in the 5th Avengers film, Avengers: The Kang Dynasty. The second post-credit scene ties into Loki season 2. We find ourselves at a 1901 exhibition with some steampunky looking invention on the stage. The banner on the side reads Victor Timely and his astounding temporal marvels. Major struts out on stage as Victor Timely and announces to the audience,
"Time is everything. It shapes our lives, but perhaps we can shape it.
So Victor Timely is another one of Kang's incarnations when Kang went back in time to 1901 and founded the town of Timely, Wisconsin, serving as the town's mayor and establishing it as an industrial center by teaching them robotics. It was at the site of Timely that Kang built his fortress city of Chronopolis. Timely, of course, is a nod to Marvel Comics history. The company previously went by the name Timely Comics. In this scene, watching Victor Timely make this speech are Loki and Mobius in period-appropriate disguise. We see more evidence of Kang in the Loki Season 2 trailer, but rumor has it there may be some reshoots underway for Loki Season 2. The jury's still out, but my theory for this scene is that Victor Timely was the same variant as He Who Remains, and that we are seeing the origin of the TVA. And all the people surrounding Loki and Mobius are the first generation of employees of the TVA, because you gotta start somewhere. Hey, thanks for watching this re-breakdown of Ant-Man the Wasp Quantumania. How'd you feel rewatching this movie? Is it as good as it was back in February? Is it a bit worse? You can support our network by getting something at nerdriot.shop, like this Miles Morales Multiverse Dive shirt. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter at EA Voss. Subscribe to the Deep Dive, subscribe to the Break Room, follow New Rockstars, and subscribe to New Rockstars for breakdowns of everything you love. Thanks for watching, bye.